Welcome inside the RX Muscle Studios in Westbury, New York. I'm your host, Sadiq Faruqi. Welcome to another exciting edition of Iron Debate. All debate, all disagreements, all mayhem right here on rxmuscle.com. And if you join us expecting Rich Piana, I'm here to disappoint you. Rich is nowhere to be found. We are putting out an ATP looking for Rich Piana. And we have to wonder why he didn't show up. He told us he was going to be on the show. He told us last night he was going to be on the show. So now we're starting to speculate as to why Rich Piana did not choose ultimately to join us on tonight's Iron Debate. And we wonder whether or not he was not up for the battle of challenging Chris the Technician Aceto. But one man that decided last minute to stand up to the challenge, joining us today from West Warwick, Rhode Island, the one, the only, Bostin Lloyd. Bostin Lloyd checking in last minute here on Iron Debate. How you doing, Bostin?
Doing good, man. Doing good.
Ready to do this? Ready to bring it?
Ready to bring it.
Look at that. Bostin Lloyd, a real trooper. Out in Portland, Maine, they call him the Technician. Our resident guru, Chris Aceto, joining us again on the Iron Debate. Chris, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I'm worried that Rich may have chickened out. Oh no, he's got. I think papers to grade. Or was that Lonnie Tipo?
Yeah, I think that's Professor Tipo.
Now, Rich must have taken a wrong turn in one of his Benz or his Ferraris or whatever he drives, or maybe he's just mixed up with. Did you sure we told him the East Coast time, or did we tell him West Coast?
In every promotion that we have put out, we have put 7 p.m. EST, which means Eastern Standard Time. So I don't know how far that excuse goes, but you have a few of your own there with the maybe he got lost in one of his Benzes. Maybe he didn't want to challenge you. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But Chris, the Technician Aceto, officially calling out Rich Piana. And joining us here in the RX Muscle Studios, the boss, Dave Palumbo, here to give the final word on all topics. Dave, how you doing tonight? Ready for the challenge?
I'm chuckling my ass off because everyone knows I did want to get Bostin Lloyd on a future show to debate. And when Rich didn't show up, which I was shocked because I spoke to Rich on the phone for a long time last night, and he was really all in, and we really catered the debate topics to Rich because he wanted to do this. When he didn't call in, I knew the only person I can call who would stand up at the last minute and argue and talk about anything pretty much is Bostin Lloyd. So I want to thank him for stopping by, and I think it might even be a better show than we anticipated.
Well, look, we like guests that are going to bring it, that are going to speak their minds, that are going to speak their opinions, and Bostin Lloyd, certainly a man who holds that card. We have a great show for you tonight. We're going to be talking about a lot of different topics, some controversial subjects. Anthony Pasquale, last year, backing out last minute from the USA Championships. A lot of mysterious circumstances, a lot of rumors, some speculating as to whether or not he crumbled under the stress, whether it was anything that he was taking that really got to him. So we have that. Tattoos. How much is too much, and is it affecting performers, competitors in the way that they're being judged? But first, we are going to talk about the 3-time reigning Mr. Olympia, Phil Heath. Phil Heath posting a video, much like a free agent would in any other sport, saying, hey, listen, I'm going to be a free agent. Who's out there to get me? Or when a free agent makes an announcement on a team that he's going to join. Well, Phil Heath announcing that he was leaving Muscle Tech to start his own line. Phil Heath, not a retired bodybuilder. Phil Heath still very much in his prime. So we're going to go to you first, Chris Aceto. Is this a good idea for Phil Heath going out on his own now, leaving a very lucrative deal with Muscle Tech, estimated between $400,000 and $500,000 a year, to start his own line?
No, Sadiq, I don't think it's a good idea because we talked about it on Heavy Muscle Radio. There's nothing better than passive income. Passive income is when Muscle Tech sends you a check and you say thank you and you deposit it. If he's making $500K a year, it's $41,000 a month. You have to sell a lot of product right out of the gate to make $41,000 a month. And if you go 4 months with, making no money because you're trying to get the company off the ground, so to speak, it takes a lot of months to not only get back that 41, But to build up past that 41, I kind of think it's short-sighted in that the supply and the demand in the marketplace has never been more skewed. There's more companies than ever before fighting for more or less the same number of dollars, the same number of customers. I mean, there's tons and tons and tons of companies. And while Phil may be, the premier bodybuilder in the world right now, for sure, and I think he's a, marvelous bodybuilder, you got to think, what's new that he can contribute? I mean, is there anything new products that he's coming out with that are totally different and novel, a breakthrough that people haven't used or seen before? If not, it's just, quote, more of the same. And it may end up backfiring if it's not a success. It may actually hurt his brand. It may hurt his credibility. So, if it was me, I'd sit back and collect the check. And, Dave can attest, actually, to the time it takes to run a company. So if he's going to run it like he says he's going to run it, Jay can attest to that. Jay's told me personally how many hours it's taken and what a toll, energy-wise, to get his brand going, and Coleman traveling and all these people. So Dave can tell you right here how much time it takes, and that may take away from his bodybuilding, which is the reason why he is where he is now.
So Chris doesn't think it's a good idea for Phil Heath, really in the prime of his career, to leave Muscle Tech, leave a cushy year-to-year passive income salary, as he put it, to go start his own line. Bostin Lloyd, what say you?
I mean, it could go either ways on this one. I mean, he could invest all of his time and money and to make his own brand. And like Chris said, if it's going to be the same of what's already out there, pre-workouts, protein powder, this and that, it's probably not a good idea because he's fighting for the #1 spot at the Olympia. He doesn't really have time, in my opinion, to be working his ass off trying to get his line going. It's going to take away from his actual success as a bodybuilder. So I can go either ways. I mean, he might come out with something new, and it's gonna be a lot of money that he's gonna have to throw away, and and hoping he's gonna get that back in return in a few years because people are gonna like the product. But I'm gonna have to say no, it's not a good idea because, like I said, Muscle Tech's a big company. They're paying him. He doesn't really have to do much. All he has to do is take pictures for Damn Magazine saying he takes Cell Tech hardcore, and that's why he's Mr. Olympia, and gets paid. So, I mean, to me, it's like, no, it's a bad idea. But most likely, I mean, there's a very rare chance that he'll come out with something good out of this.
Chris, you don't see some value in the fact that, again, he is in his prime of his career. He is the most celebrated bodybuilder at the moment. In trying to capitalize upon that in starting his own brand, obviously there's a lot of work to it, but clearly he's going to have people around him to do a lot of the day-to-day business work. He is a name. He is a brand. Why not strike when the iron's hot?
Because for the same reason that Michael Jordan collects the checks and he doesn't start his own sneaker company. Meaning you let the people who know how to do what they do best do what they do best. That might be, let's say, you let Jack Owak at VPX come out with the products. You let people at Muscle Tech develop and market the products, and you lend your name and credibility to the product. You don't try to, like I said, Michael Jordan doesn't start a sneaker company, or he endorses Cadillac. He doesn't come out and start making Cadillacs or cars similar to. So, it's you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You should copy or model the people who have came before you in other sports. I mean, there's a lot of risk involved, while his rise in the sport has been, for bodybuilding competition, has been beyond meteoric. It's been like a rocket. That might not translate into sales of product. And if you're not sure, there are people we don't even know who run some of these, esoteric companies and who do a lot of sales, and they have no bodybuilding background. So just because you're a great bodybuilder does not translate into sales of a product.
Well, Bostin, let me ask you this. Again, considering his name, considering the brand, and considering his reach right now, couldn't you make the argument that if he waited till later, waited till a point where, again, it was expected that his star was going to fade a little bit, and that's when he was going to get into the supplement game, that he'd just be better off now when he is a big name?
Yeah, I would say he would be better off like Ronnie Coleman did, already done with his career, completely done. And then there's less stress because he doesn't have to be the top of the world anymore. He already has his name out. He's already Mr. Olympia. And then everything's done, and all from there he just uses his name. He uses all of the time he has. He doesn't have to train, twice a day, do cardio, and all that stuff, and basically just takes the stress. So if he was in like Ronnie's position where he's already done competing, that's fine. But right now, Phil Heath to me is in his prime, meaning he could still take 3-4 more Mr. Olympians if he brings the same package he did last year, just because that illusion he has, nobody's really going to touch him at this point. So saying that, I would say he would be smarter off just putting his name on a company like Chris said, and letting them do all the marketing, Most bodybuilders are very stupid. Let's be real here. They don't know how to market themselves. Like they're pretty dumb, They just know how to pump stuff and train and eat 7 times a day and they have the genetics. Their guru tells them what to do. They follow what their guru tells them to do, and their genetics bring them to where they're going to be. So saying that, Phil Heath, he seems like one of the smarter ones actually, but still he's at that point where he needs to really step back and look at the bigger picture. So it could hurt his Olympia placing by doing something like this with all the travel and stuff like that.
Well, Boston, I'll follow up with that. Just given this turn of direction, does this signal that, all right, maybe he is going to be focusing more of his attention to the supplement line going forward and maybe not so much as a bodybuilder?
I mean, if he did that, that'd be very dumb. If you win the Mr. Olympia, you get, I think it's $250,000 a year. Your name, I mean, I don't know. I think he could at least win 3 or 4 more from where he's going right now. But I think that would just be very dumb. If he was like dying out, like I think right now, I want to say Kai Green is still in his prime, but I don't see him taking out Phil Heath. Maybe somebody like Kai Green coming out with a line, that would be a little bit smarter. But somebody who is Phil Heath's, he's coming in. Everyone thinks, all right, Phil Heath's going to win. Who's second? I would definitely wouldn't make that move. Honestly, I wouldn't.
All right, so we're going to go to Dave Palumbo for the final word. Both Chris and Boston in complete agreement on that, which is kind of rare on this show. Both agreeing on the subject. Both think it's a bad idea. Dave, what say you?
Well, I was thinking about this earlier. Phil usually gets, I think, Muscle Tech usually matches his prize money. I wonder who's going to match that $200,000 he's going to win for the Olympia this year. He certainly is not going to match his own money. But you know what? I'm going to take a different approach. I think that it might not be a bad idea for Phil. I think it might be actually a good idea. I have to imagine that Phil is a smart dude, and he's not going to just jump into this blind. If he is, then he's going to lose his shirt, because I know this industry. It's a tough industry to make a buck in. But I have a feeling that he's got a heavy investor behind him, and I think if he has the heavy investor, I'm assuming he's probably taking a salary for himself as part of the line. Now, that being said, I'm sure that's going to take a lot of the profits away from him, so it might take him 2-3 years to make the company profitable. But if he's still drawing a high salary and he owns more than 50% of the company, by the time he's ready to retire, the company could be doing very well, and he might not have really given up any money. So this could be a brilliant move on his part. We don't know the details behind the scenes.
So Dave Palumbo chiming in with the final word. Again, someone in his position, in Phil Heath's position, you have to imagine there are going to be very smart people approaching him with that idea, giving him a foundation, giving him a plan. He's not going to dive into that head first. Our next topic, we're staying in that supplement game. So now we're going to go on the understanding that Phil Heath is going to go in this direction. He is going to have his own supplement line. Well, he's not the only one. Jay Cutler, 4-time Mr. Olympia, starting up the BPI line, or his signature series of the BPI line a couple of years back. So now the question is this: who is going to be more successful now and in the long run in the supplement game? Is it going to be Phil Heath, or is it going to be Jay Cutler? Boston, we're going to start with you.
Jay Cutler, 100%. 100%. All right, do you want me to explain why?
Absolutely. That is the point of this.
Okay. Jay Cutler, I met both guys. Jay Cutler's just more personable. He's better liked. But just all over a better guy. Like, let's say if I was a promoter for a show and I was to pick, let's say there were Kai Green, Jay Cutler, or Phil Heath as a guest poser, I'd pick, Jay every time, because he's going to actually talk to the people. He's He's going to make everyone feel home. He's going to bring more audience, obviously, and stuff like that. And just he's a better marketer in general. To me, he's done more in the sport of bodybuilding than Phil Heath. Obviously, I think is Jay a little bit older than Phil?
Yes.
Yeah, so he's just done a little bit more. He's been around in it since he was like 19. He did teen nationals when he was like 18. Lost to Branch Warren. He has way more followers. So usually when you have way more followers, even though he's not Mr. Olympia right now, when Jay Cutler pops up, even people who are not bodybuilders or they're not, and look, they know who Jay Cutler is. Phil Heath, not the top. Obviously, the bodybuilding industry all knows Phil Heath and a couple people outside, but Jay Cutler still has a way bigger fan base.
Chris, what about you? Phil Heath or Jay Cutler? Now in the long run, who's going to have more success in the supplement world?
Well, I think you have to go back to people's who they are, their character, so to speak. I mean, I'm not speaking against Phil's character, but I know that just from a competitive standpoint, although Jay seems like he was successful, this is a guy who couldn't beat Willie Stalling at the Nationals, right, Dave? and meaning he lost at the Nationals. He didn't win the Nationals. He lost at the first New York Pro that he did, which was the Night of the Champions. He got smoked there, 10th. He got second to last at his first Mr. Olympia. He got third at the first Ironman, fourth at the first Arnold that he did. So he's not used to winning, but he's used to persevering. And I think in the supplement business or in any business, you have to be driven and you have to have passion, but you have to know how to get back on your feet. And he's proven that as a bodybuilder. He lost the Mr. Olympia title. He got it back. This is a guy who can get a hypothetical sales report for the month and said we did shit sales, and he's going to grind it out and get the report 3 months later and said we did record breaking sales. He's just going to find a way to move the company or business forward. So and I think if you're talking from a business perspective, you got to remember that this is someone who negotiated. He wasn't given probably the highest paying contract with MD. And then not only that, but think about what it took to say the second time around, sorry, MD, goodbye. I mean, that takes balls, but it takes business sense. So he took his brand and he went somewhere else to a different magazine. So I think all those cumulatively point to somebody who, although has no business degree, knows how to run a business.
Bostin, I'm going to ask you something you alluded to in your opening statement on this subject, and that is that both these competitors, they are sort of at different stages of their career. How much does that play into it? Again, just given the fact that Phil Heath is younger and really doing this in the prime of his career. Jay Cutler still has a lot in the tank, but he is older now, has a more established name. How much does that play into who's going to have more success long-term, given how competitive this industry is and given how much more competitive it's going to be in the next 5 years?
Well, huge for Jay Cutler, because Jay, I don't think he's really focusing on bodybuilding anymore. So I think he's just going to put all his time and effort in marketing his company, marketing what works, or what he feels works, and just more people are going to listen to him. I think he just has a better, he has a more honest approach, I think. He's even came out with videos saying, I do what it takes to win, and he doesn't bounce around questions when people ask him about, steroids or, anything. He just kind of, he in a good way, he doesn't claim natural, but he says, I do what it takes to win, and it gives people that know bodybuilding, he doesn't need to go out there and say it like I do, but he doesn't, give a misinterpretation. I think he's just better liked. So, when somebody's better liked, I'd be more intrigued to looking in Jay Cutler's product than I will to, Phil Heath's product. Because I think Phil, even though he's successful, I don't think he's really personable. So I would way rather go to Jay. If he had a line, I'd go to him right away.
Chris, who's going to have the bigger name as far as a brand and ultimately as far as a business over the next 5 years as both these competitors progress in their supplement lines?
Well, I'd ask that to Joe Weider if he was alive. and the reason I say that is Joe put, there was a time when Joe used to put bodybuilders on the cover of Muscle Fitness, but it was not, it was something special. And Joe picked all the covers, and that's when Muscle Fitness, believe me, had a massive circulation. And he used to put fairly regularly, people know that, Jay on the cover. And that was before Jay was Mr. Olympia. So he put Jay on the cover because as a guy who had a magazine when he was 16, Joe Weider, he knew a little bit about business and marketing and what sells. His gut was to put Jay on the cover when Jay hadn't even won the Nationals yet. Amazing. So, I defer to what Joe would do.
Dave, I'm going to let you have the final word on this subject. Jay Cutler and Phil Heath. Who is going to have more success in the supplement world in the short run and in the long term?
Conventional wisdom would say Jay Cutler. Go with Jay Cutler. And that's, normally right off the top of my head, I would say Jay Cutler because I think he's a great businessman. But I also know how this industry is. It's very fickle. They only know people who are relevant in the industry. And people become very irrelevant very quickly. I can talk about bodybuilders from 5 years ago, and no one knows who these guys are once they stop competing. Now, Jay does stay in the news, but, in 5 years from now, when Phil is still maybe winning the Olympia, Jay is off the radar for 5 or 6 years. He's out of competition. Maybe Phil's more relevant. I think that for Phil, surviving the next 5 years in the supplement world is going to be very important to him. If he can keep his company, constantly growing, even if at a small rate, I think in 5 years from now, he might be a major player in the business. I think that he's not a dumb guy. I think he's smart. I think he surrounds himself with wise, smart people around him. And I think that he might be more relevant to the upcoming kids, the kids who go into GNC and Vitamin Shop and spend a ridiculous amount of marked up money on these products. And that might be his calling card. Oh, we want to be like Mr. Olympia. They're going to just see Jay Cutler as some guy who's a knowledgeable bodybuilder like me. People know me more for my announcing and for my coverage of the sport than when I competed because it's not relevant anymore. It's been 10 years.
Well, Dave, this brings up a question. Is this going to be a trend going forward where you have more competitors starting to make that jump in the prime of their careers?
Well, I think for a guy like Phil Heath, who's Mr. Olympia, it's probably less risky. I think for other guys to start their own lines while they're in the prime of their career, it is way, way more risky because, at this point, I don't. What's their gimmick? Or like Chris said, what new innovative technology are they going to bring that people are going to want to jump on their bandwagon? Phil Heath is banking on the fact that Mr. Olympia is going to sell his line. That's the ragu of it, if you know what I mean. But only time will tell.
You don't want to explain that a little inside?
No, the inside joke was that, I guess on the website in describing Phil's new protein, they used an analogy where the analogy is, do you want homemade, pasta sauce, or do you want the store-bought kind? We're the homemade stuff. I don't know what that has to do with protein powders, and I don't think that Phil's mixing up the stuff in his bathtub, so I don't really understand. So I kind of was a little poke of fun on my part.
Like the Chef Boyardee approach.
Yes.
You see there in the upper left corner the hashtag RX debate. If you want to get involved in the conversation, if you have any questions for any of our participants tonight, you tweet us at hashtag RX debate. And if the best ones, we will make sure to get them on air later tonight. Moving on to our next subject, tattoos. Now, we talked about having Rich Piana on this show. Unfortunately, he is not because this topic would have been right up his alley, but it is becoming more and more prominent in the bodybuilding industry, and that is competitors having more and more and more tattoos. And it is one thing to make a fashion statement, one thing to have it as a personality trait, but now there's starting to be some more discussion as far as whether or not judges are taking too kindly to it, if it is actually impacting competitors' performance, the judging, and again, if it's something where too much can actually be to a competitor's detriment. So, Chris, we're going to go to you now. Tattoos, do you see this as something that could jeopardize a judge's perception of a competitor, and if too much, if we're making too much of this? You see Rich Piana there.
I told Dave Palumbo at the Orlando, we sat next to each other and did the play-by-play, and I said, I can't take the tattoos. They're so damn distracting, it's ridiculous. Dave Kalik was a trainer, guru out in California. He was working with the bodybuilder, and he said, hey, Chris, you got a minute? I said, yeah. He said, what'd you think of so-and-so? I said, dude, I couldn't even get past the tattoos. The whole back, I couldn't even see it. So the point is, you know what? People might get tattoos because, for their marquee, they may be attentive or a way to draw attention, but they're not attractive to the bodybuilder's physique. I think the litmus test for that is, people would disagree, is, well, then just tattoo the whole entire body. It's not an attractive way. It's not an attraction to the body. And I was thinking about the question, and I don't think anyone, and it's a stretch, but anyone who's a man, or in this case, a guy who's, chasing down some hot chick, if she's tattooed from the, it's not something that, is probably attractive to him. It may not persuade him from pursuing her, but it's not something extra that attracts a guy to a girl, in my opinion. And when judging a physique in bodybuilding, I think it's very distractive. I mean, if you're looking for the intricate details, striations, and some guy's got a tattoo on his tricep, it takes away from the clean look to it.
Bostin, what say you on this subject? It is one that is starting to get some more buzz. Tattoos, is it something that could become a problem if a competitor who's serious about competing, and it's something that maybe some judges don't really take a liking to? What's your take on this subject?
I mean, I don't think any competitor in their right mind, when this is bodybuilding, when you're trying to show off your physique, is going to go off the deep end and do a ton of tattoos. I mean, if you look at the top five Olympians, top 10, I would say if they have a tattoo, maybe it's like a little thing on their wrist, or their little arm, or something small. You don't see any of the top guys with these tattoos. Now I'm going to bring it on the other hand with females, women's physique, bikini, figure. I think it's kind of sexy, honestly. And when a girl has a little bit of tattoos going maybe through her arm, or maybe a little thing on her rib cage, I think it's more of it's like a spunk factor. Like, I think it looks good. Like, I don't think judges would rate that down. In fact, I think it brings like a personality to the person without come out on stage with a little bit of tattoos. It shows maybe a little spunk to them, a little personality. Now, guys, on the other hand, when we're judged on flexing and detail, striations, and you're covered in tats, it's definitely going to hurt. It's definitely going to hurt you because you can't really see anything. I have a tattoo on my left arm, and I don't regret it because the only reason I got it was to cover my scars, because I have 3 scars from 3 incisions, and that's the only reason I got a tattoo, is to cover those. And even now, when I hit a most muscular, nothing really pops on that shoulder because it's covered with a tattoo. So it definitely does take away from the illusion when you hit poses. But then again, I turn it around with female competitors. It looks pretty damn good, in my opinion.
Chris, you would know this better than anyone. The conversations that judges have amongst themselves as far as what they're looking for, what they will tell a competitor, what they need to work on, little things that they want to see show to show. Are tattoos something that they actively are discussing now? Is something that they may negatively mark a competitor based off that kind of a look?
Well, I think, I don't know the answer to that question, but I know the subliminal effect it could have, meaning, you got a bodybuilding show, 2 guys, they look the exact same. You can't decide who's going to win. You look, okay, you defer to what? I would, if I was sitting next to Dave and I said, I don't know who's going to win. They look so much alike. Dave would say, condition, go with the guy with condition. I say, yeah, I'll go with the guy. We'd try to nail it down to the minutia of who would have the best condition. And if the guys are still, in the same level of condition, I'd probably kick out the guy with the tattoo on his back, even if it was small, versus, that's just me, versus the guy without the tattoo. I'm looking for the more, quote, clean-looking physique, clean lines, clean definition, clean flow, and that, at the end of the day, if it's that close, the tattoo would negatively, whether I'm aware of it or not, impact my decision on who I would think would be the winner. So my assumption is, I don't think judges talk about it in that sense, but they would have. It may have the same effect on them.
Bostin, you yourself, a very outspoken guy, self-proclaimed. You look at tattoos, and why is it that a young person would get a tattoo? Why is that an athlete would get a tattoo? Why is it that a bodybuilder will get a tattoo? It's self-expression. It's personality. Do you see this as the bodybuilding world? If there is a negative perception to it, do you see this as a hindrance of personality of sorts?
I mean, I don't know. Like I said, everyone gets tattoos for the wrong reason, but I think the majority of people get tattoos I mean, just because it's the new thing to do. Oh, let me get a tattoo. Back 20, 30 years, nobody had tattoos, but everybody's getting them now. So everyone thinks like, oh, let me fit in and get a tattoo. And I don't think it should be like that. Maybe they're trying to be somebody they're not by these tattoos. But it definitely, like Chris says, it definitely hinders their physique. And if I was a judge and I saw somebody hit a back double and this dude had his, one delt fully covered in a tat and I couldn't see everything pop, and it was that close, I would skip right over to the next guy and be like, put him in first, because this is bodybuilding. This is you're trying to show what you have, and by taking away with that the tattoo, it's I don't know, it's just kind of corny in my opinion.
So again, I guess I'm looking at this from a old school, new school perspective. You don't see any battle in that going forward? Some of the younger competitors coming up, some of the younger aspiring bodybuilders, that they wouldn't look at that and say, well, why should I hinder myself, get a tattoo or not?
I hope that judges will start to rate that down if it gets too out of hand with crazy tattoos. Like physique guys and bikini figure, I think a little bit of tats they're not going to care about. Now, if bodybuilders are starting to do a lot of it, I think they're definitely going to have to put the hammer down and step that down 100%.
Dave Palumbo, we go to you for the final word. Tattoos. Is it too much, and is it really a hindrance to a competitor's performance and the way they're judged?
Back in the 90s, everyone wore the hoop earring. Flex Wheel had the 2 hoop earrings. So if you were cool, you had 2. If you weren't quite as cool, you had 1. Everyone had a hoop earring. But the hoop earrings, when you were bored with it, you took them out and no one knew you had them. I had the hoop earrings. No one could tell because I don't have, there's no marks from them. Nowadays, if you don't have a sleeve or a tattoo sleeve or some cool tribal tattoos, like, you just don't fit in. Now, ironically, Boston made a good point on the men's physique guys and the bikini girls out there, even on the figure girls, because they don't really do anything on stage. They're not really hitting poses. They're kind of just looking aesthetic up there. It actually kind of looks cool. Like, you could actually add a little bit of cool factor to that aspect of the sport, because there's no way for them to express themselves because they're not allowed to hit poses. The bikini girls could shake their butts a little bit probably. And, obviously the men's physique guys are trying to do anything to draw attention to themselves. So I think on a men's physique guy, maybe a sleeve wouldn't be so bad. Obviously on bodybuilding, it's obscuring. It would kind of be like, who would put a bumper sticker on the Mona Lisa? I mean, you don't do that. I mean, it doesn't it doesn't make it better. It makes it worse. So yeah, I'm looking for the other side of the argument, but I can't see how tattoos can help. I know that a lot of us get tattoos for meaningful purposes. I have a few on me, but I try to put the tattoos in a very discreet place, like on my ankles or maybe my wrists. Lee Priest obviously is the epitome of gone insane, and he overdid it. I mean, he's starting to put them on his face, and he just lost his mind, So Rich Piana can do whatever he wants because he doesn't compete, and he makes that very clear. So I think for Rich, it's more of a statusy, cool look, and he doesn't give a shit because he's not getting on stage. So, but if I'm a top Olympian, I wouldn't be getting any obscure tattoos. That's for sure.
So for Rich, it helps him.
Absolutely. I agree.
100%.
Well, again, that goes to the personality of Rich Piana and who he is. And again, we thought we were going to have him on the show tonight.
He actually just called me. He just called us on the phone, but I think we should ignore him at this point. We'll have to get him. We'll have to get him on a future show. He kind of missed his mark.
Again, the hashtag is #RxDebate. Get your questions in now. The best ones we will read on air and have the questions answered. We're going to step aside, but when we return, we've talked about supplements, we've talked about tattoos. Now we're going to ask a question which may seem simple, but it has some people talking. Is bodybuilding a sport? Chew over that. We'll be right back. RxMuscle.com, Iron Debate.
This is IFBB Figure Pro Heather Dees, and you are watching RX Television.
We got a nice little care package from Quest Nutrition.
There better be some apple pie on this.
I'm taking apple pie at all of them.
All right, what up? It's Gilbert Melendez, chilling with my Quest bar here. First and foremost, most importantly, they're delicious. But it's good to have a good protein bar before training. Gluten-free, you gotta love it. And it tastes good, and it feels like it's doing the trick. I listen to my body, and it says yes to this, so give it a shot.
They taste great. They're awesome. They allow me to feel like I have a little treat while I'm still eating real strict for my training camp and everything. So I'm super excited. Off the top of my head, I have to say the cinnamon roll, the apple pie, and probably the lemon. But I haven't had one yet that I don't like.
Hi, I'm Andrea Holiday, and I'm an IFBB Women's Physique Pro, but I'm also a coach and a trainer. When clients come to me for advice, I make it my business to give them the most intelligent solutions to all their problems. And I base that information on each person's specific goals. As an elite level competitor, my goal is to gain high quality muscle while maintaining a lean, ripped physique. Species Nutrition's Isolate is the purest whey isolate on the market. It has no fat, no carbs, and it tastes outrageously great. My personal favorite is chocolate peanut butter. So next time you purchase the protein shake, remember, buy the best, buy Isolate.
This is IFBB Figure Pro Heather Dees, and you are watching RX Television.
Welcome back, Iron Debate on RxMuscle.com. I'm your host, Sadiq Faruqi. Glad you can join us on this third episode of Iron Debate. Well, we just did hear from Rich Piana, and as Dave Palumbo suspected, as we all suspected, we were joking around obviously earlier on, Rich thought we meant 7 o'clock his time, whereas in fact the show started at 7 Eastern. Dave, you're the judge here. Do we buy that?
I'll buy it. I'm letting Rich off the hook. I'm already scheduling him for Wednesday, July 30th. We're going to have some seriously good topics. I'm going to work on them for the next 2 weeks, and I'm sure Rich will not disappoint the next time. We'll make sure we get our schedules. But we have to thank Boston. I was going to get Bostin Lloyd on the next show anyway, so I'm glad we got him here tonight. You know, I always love to hear his opinions. They're as brutally honest probably as Rich Piana's will be.
No, Boston is stepping in last minute and doing really a sensational job on this show to this point. Chris Aceto, the technician out in Maine, doing his thing as well. We're going to have Rich on in our next show, so definitely going to stay tuned for that. We move on to our next subject now, and, well, we left you with this on the break. Bodybuilding. Is it a real sport? Very simple question. May seem a little complex to think about. Boston, let's go to you first. Bodybuilding, is it a real sport?
This is funny because I've made many Facebook posts on this. Bodybuilding is not and I love bodybuilding as competitive bodybuilding, as going out there and being very competitive and wanting to win, doing everything it takes to win, and putting your mind to a goal. And basically, when you put your mind to a goal, you're going to achieve it. Now, as a non-bodybuilder saying, "Oh, I just want to look good for the beach," you're not going to push yourself to that limit because now you got competition and you're going to have to go up there against other people that look very good. That being said, bodybuilding is not a sport because it's not to me it's not a talent. Anyone could be a bodybuilder, and what separates good bodybuilders from decent bodybuilders to great bodybuilders to Mr. Olympians is all genetics in discipline. Whether you could sit down and eat 7 to 8 meals a day, whether you're able to pump yourself full of drugs, or whether you're able to do whatever you want to do to pick it apart. It's all, you know what I mean? You're kind of born with the genetics. So, a guy with shitty genetics could take all the drugs in the world. He could train harder than all the Olympians. He could eat properly, but he won't be the best. And it's not a matter of practice. He's just not born with the best genetics. So to me, it's not a sport. It's more of it's a hobby. But if you're at the professional level, I wouldn't even know what to call it. But it's definitely not a sport like I consider like football a competitive sport, like something you got to practice hours and hours and hours to become. And obviously, you got to be born with good genetics to be a football player. But I mean, if you bust your ass from day one and you're trying to be the best at that, it's something. You know what I mean? I mean, you could push it really far as a bodybuilder. You're either born with it or you're not. And you either have the discipline or you don't.
All right, so Bostin says bodybuilding is not a sport. Chris, let's head over to you. Is bodybuilding a sport?
In terms of, I think any sport requires good genetics, and any endeavor, anything to be successful in requires a lot of discipline. So, Manute Bol was a good basketball player because he was genetically tall. But at the same time, there's still genetically tall people who are shitty basketball players. You got to have a combination of both. And in terms of the it's a sport. Bodybuilding is a sport, and the way we measure success is a little bit different than, of course, track and field. The fastest guy who gets across this finish line first is obviously the winner, and you can obviously see who's second, third, and fourth. But bodybuilding is, while still a sport, is a little bit different the way it's measured. It's kind of like akin to boxing, where of course you can knock someone out, and Phil Heath can knock someone out with his physique and be the clear winner. But maybe the guys second, third, fourth, and fifth, have to be judged by people. And how many boxing matches have been judged by people where people disagree because it's a close fight? So I think of it as a sport akin to like boxing, where where the methodology of measuring who's number one is always there, by knockout in boxing, or when Dorian Yates comes on stage and knocks everyone out, or Coleman literally knocks everyone out with just a crazy combination of mass and size and condition. But after that, it's a judge sport. So yes, it's a sport. I consider anything where anything what fatigues the hell out of you and makes you sore and makes you exhausted, almost anything like that would be considered a sport. Anything that you have, any activity where you have to follow a very regimented lifestyle and diet translates itself into a sport, whether it be track and field. Athletes have a very regimented training program, very regimented diet that affects their performance. What you eat, no matter what you take, anabolic wise, what you eat has a major role in determining your success in this sport. So it is a sport, and I guess if not a sport, it would just be considered. You have to then define it. If that's the case, if it's not a sport, then you have to define it as something other than a sport. And I think you will struggle to find. You can put it into pageantry, which obviously it doesn't fit into. And I think anyone who's won the Mr. Olympia title, Lee Haney, Arnold, Dorian, Jay, Phil, the whole gambit, would consider it a sport.
Well, Chris, let me jump in real quick, because Bostin did utter one opinion in the sense where you either have it or you don't when it comes to bodybuilding. As far as a competitor, as far as your physique, as far as whether or not you're going to have it for the sport. Now, Dave Palumbo has often said that he sees someone in a gym and without doing anything, that guy could go out there and compete just by his physique, just by his look. Again, going off that note, in the sense where, from the you either have it or you don't school of thought, and marrying that to...
Dude.
What's that?
Listen, I'll blow that out of the water. I know someone who took care of Michael Jackson's property for years. He was the guy. I know him very, very, very well. You either have it in anything or you don't. You either have the ability to excel in something or you don't. But what makes, the guy who's number number one different than everyone else. It's many times his ability. Does anyone really think that Coleman didn't train the hardest? Yes, he had it. Does anyone have any doubt that Dorian wasn't the most dedicated guy when he was winning and the hardest training and the strongest and everything else? Yeah, he had it. He had the genetics for it. But there's something else that sets people apart. So in any sport, you have to, quote, have it or not. In swimming, my brother had it. He was an Olympic athlete, almost. Everyone else, So getting back to like the Michael Jackson analogy, the fact is, and the guy used to practice dancing 9-10 hours a day, days on end. And, people would say, oh, he's just, of course he's got it. And of course he's like a freak, the way he can dance and everything. But people don't see the extra effort that he would put in. And, I would say that's the case with anyone who's on top of their game, really on top of their game in any sport. You would ask them, were you born, with it? They'd say yes. But at the same time, I've crafted it by working, my ass off to the very nth degree to be absolutely number one.
Boston, Chris brings up past champions and what they had, the dedication that they had to put in to get to the top and stay at the top. And that does define this as a sport. I'm going to bring another angle into this because bodybuilding is not the only discipline in which that topic is debated. Golf, figure skating, these are all debated topics as to whether or not it's a sport, especially golf, where, again, NASCAR, right, as Johnny Styles brings up. When you have that, and again, some of the past bodybuilding champions, if you were to ask them, they're going to say it's a sport. What do you say to that as far as that parallel where there is that question as to whether or not it is a sport when you look at some of the other sports that have their legitimacy questioned as well?
This is the thing. I love bodybuilding for multiple reasons. I love the chemical side. I love the training side. I love the diet side. Everything, just the whole combination of just experimenting is what I like the most. But the thing is to me, if drugs are a variable on how you place, obviously diet and training are important, but drugs are very important too. A lot of people they like to take that off the spotlight. When you put drugs into the program of how you do in a sport, or if you want to call it a sport, to me it's not. Then it's not a sport, because then you're putting you have to put stuff in your body to possibly affect your placing, possibly place how you look. Without the drugs, nobody's going to look like that.
Well, what about baseball then? With all the PED concerns in the sport of baseball.
Correct, but I honestly don't think that all those guys are taking shit. We all know that everyone on that Olympia stage is taking a boatload of shit. And we're not talking about growth hormone. You still got to hit a baseball. Barry Bonds hit all those hormones. He still had to hit the baseball. So in bodybuilding, it's like, we could pump all this shit in. I had freaking 15-inch arms, and then I started pumping oil in them, and now I got 20-inch arms. I would still have 15-inch arms if I never started loading with oil. So, to me, it's like if you're bringing in site enhancement oil, man, I've heard some horror stories about what these guys are doing. To me, it's not even a sport. It's more like an art. It's an art to me. It's not a sport.
Again, if you want to chime in, this is a heated debate. #RxDebate. Chime in whether or not bodybuilding is a sport. Dave Palumbo, we go to you for the final word. Is bodybuilding to you a sport?
I think everything in life is a sport. Cheerleading is a sport, if you want to look at it. And what do? They're cheering for someone else who's playing another sport. So it's like a sport within a sport. I think being a magician is a sport because it requires talent and practice. They had it. Look at this Iron Wok show on the Food Network where they have people, cooking against each other. That's a sport. Anything where you're pitting people against each other competitively is technically a sport, as far as I'm concerned, and you can rationalize them all. Do bodybuilders use performance-enhancing drugs? Absolutely, but so do they. They use them in every other sport too.
Not to the extent. Come on now.
Well, it doesn't matter. Now you're quantifying. It's still a sport. People are going to use any advantage they can get in any sport they can get, and we all know that. Whether it has better swimming gear, better goggles to see under the water when you're swimming. They got a million different bikes now. They can't weigh under 10 pounds because then that's cheating. So they have a lot of different ramifications and qualifications of a sport. But I think everything technically is a sport if you're competitive enough. And are people?
I guess you could say pornography is a sport.
Johnny would definitely say that. Yes.
How?
best porn star. They get porn star awards. Like it's like the Olympia. Like who has the biggest dick? Who gives the best blowjobs? Like you could give a case for anything if you want to start saying that.
Right.
And these guys are pumping, shit in their dick to stay hard after 3 orgasms. So there you go, enhancements.
That's
So
right.
you can call anything a sport, I guess.
Right. Well, I mean, bodybuilding, is something that you have to do repetitively to improve yourself at. Granted, it's subjectively judged, but that really is not the fault of the sport. It's maybe the fault of how it's structured. But I think, like Chris said, when you see Mr. Olympia on stage, very rarely do people say that guy shouldn't have won. It's usually pretty knock it out of the park. So we could probably go back and forth and debate anything, but I pretty much think anything can be defined as, quote, a sport.
Well, Dave, you know what? One of the odd litmus tests for that is, although I don't think Phil is as good a businessman as Jay, both of them have, Jay and Phil, to their credit, both of them have fans in other sports who consider them athletes.
Right.
Whether it be football players, wrestlers, cyclists. I've been at Jay's house, and you see all the autographed photos from different high-profile athletes to Jay. And there's always a reference to like some type of brother in sport. Not always, but they themselves consider football players, hockey players,
people lift
basketball
weights.
players.
Chris, people lift weights to get better and improve themselves. Why can't the actual weightlifting be a sport itself? I mean, which is obviously powerlifting and Olympic lifting is, but the results of the weightlifting, what people look like, is also a sport. If you think about it, I mean, it's still an athletic endeavor.
I'll reference Joey to twice in one show he'd roll over in his grave. Right? If
You
was
get a commission from him?
All right, so let's move on to our last subject again. Boston did bring up the inclusion of drugs, and that's how involved it is. We'll leave that to the individual participant. But last year, Anthony Pasquale caused some waves, backing out last minute from the USA Championships when many thought he was going to be a very strong contender to win it all. He is, rumored to be participating this year, but it really brought up a lot of discussion, a lot of mystery as far as what happened. Why did he back out? And there was a lot of speculation, a lot of innuendo. Some thought maybe he really just cracked under the pressure, and some thought that maybe some things you were taking, we talked about the drugs, some things that he was taking got to him perhaps. And this brings up a bigger question. Chris, we're going to go over to you first because this is a serious topic. The stress that bodybuilders are under, show to show, season to season, training regimen to training regimen, is it to a point where this is a legitimate concern and something that the bodybuilding world really needs to look into as a valid concern for its competitors?
I don't know. I don't think they have to look into it. I think the responsibility lies on the person. And my experience is that bodybuilders prepare for shows in a way which puts them, they put themselves under an enormous amount of unneeded stress. And it's getting worse because they're checking Instagram every 2 seconds to see what their competitor looks like. They're on Facebook to see what their competitor looks like. They're on RX Muscle to see what someone said about them. And it baffles me that, one, they make the mistake of doing that. And two, even if they do that, that it has such an internal impact on their psyche preparing for a show. So I'm not saying that's what happened to Anthony Pasquale last year and he short-circuited and crashed and burned. But it is so common these days. And, in the 90s, maybe, we always talk about, hey, the physiques in the 90s, the physiques in the 90s. In the physiques in the 90s, people didn't even know what each other looked like, and they didn't put themselves under pressure. The pressure they put themselves on was, Dave Palumbo or, Kevin Levrone or Dorian or Sean Ray may show up looking like wild this year. I have no idea what they look like, so I better button down the hatches and put the work in, even though it's not a sport, according to some. But, I need to button it down, and it just seems that people with texting and this person said that and that person said this, it just, it's getting so far you know, removed from what it should be, because the only stress should be the physical stress, and that's it. And people put themselves under way too much stress, and I don't know if it was something that Anthony was taking, or you know, I just think that people should enjoy the process, and it's something I harp on all the time with people. I try to make it fun for people I work with and tell them, you know, F everybody, which really means, you know, focus on yourself. I don't know if that answers the question, but you can tell by the way I raise my voice,
Sure,
that I'm passionate about it.
absolutely.
I think it's stupid that people put themselves under stress.
Boston, you've been very outspoken about this subject in particular, as far as the usage in this industry. How much do you think that plays a part in these kind of instances? Not necessarily saying that is exactly what happened with Anthony Pasquale, but certainly this is a growing concern. How much do you see usage as a participant in this kind of an instance for other competitors around the industry?
Well, I mean, look at me. I mean, I was going to do the New Englands in 2000 and last year, and 4 days before the New Englands, I injected into the ulnar nerve, damaged the nerve. My hand is still numb 8 months later. Still not full function. My wrist is starting to get some strength back, but I'm still messed up. I had to back out of the show, and I know 3 other competitors that the same thing had happened to them. They just didn't go public with it, and I just don't really care about even getting judged. So I came public with it. And, I mean, like I said, he could have had a bad shot.
So Bostin Lloyd chiming in with his concerns. Chris, we're going to go back over to you. Again, this is something that obviously we know Bostin is very passionate about, very outspoken about, as far as the drug usage, as far as the frequency of it in this industry. Do you think that is something that could be looked at as a factor, maybe not now, but going forward as this becomes more rampant? And you said it the best, the role that social media plays in competitors, bodybuilders being so self-conscious of the way they look at all times.
You know, listen, will laugh and say I'm a liar, but you know who I work with, and I'm sure people know who I've worked with the last few years, and people scoff at it, but they're not jamming shit left, right, and center. You know, they're no angels, but unless they're doing it behind my back, you know, it's a non-issue for me.
Boss, we have Bostin
and for
back.
them, you know, I mean, it's
we cut off.
Yeah, Boston, I wanted you to finish your thought, just as far as this subject and as far as, again, something you've been very outspoken about.
Well, actually, it's funny because actually I've talked to a lot of clients of Chris's, and Chris is so minimal dose that I actually honestly don't believe it. I believe that he's actually putting these guys on these dosages, but do I believe that they're actually following the dosage protocols that he's putting them on? I don't. Back in the 90s, I would say yes, because the gear was a lot better, but now you just need more of it. So I know personal experience from friends that are in the bodybuilding world that they are pumping tons of shit to win a show, which, I mean, like me, I get really obsessed with winning. I'm glad I had to back out of this show because of the move, because I get so obsessed that if I don't do everything it takes to win, I won't be satisfied. And like, I'll be pumping, 30 cc's, 40 cc's of synthol a day on top of, 6 cc's of gear, the last 8 weeks, every day. And I'll just be, pushing it, and I'll feel like shit. My body feels like shit, and I won't feel good. And so that saying, Chris, his clients look great. Obviously, his nutrition approach is great. His guys don't need that much. Whatever, great genetics. Like, I guarantee you, Chris doesn't take people that don't have potential. But saying that, it is, Chris might train the same guy who put him on low gear. Then this same dude might go to Farrah, and Farrah might load him up on tons of stuff. And so it just all depends. Some guys don't need that much. Like black guys. I saw a black guy in the gym yesterday. I go, hey man, I go, you have serious genetics. Like, you look amazing. How many times do you eat a day? I was just wondering. Obviously, this dude's only like 22. He's like, oh man, he's like, I only eat like twice a day, like cereal and milk in the morning, and then before I go to bed, like, the kid's shredded. I'm like, let me see your midsection, just shredded. I'm like, this is retarded. And so some guys don't need that much, but white boys need a lot more. I'll tell you that.
Chris, you want to respond?
No, I already, all the black dudes I work with, so, we get Team Black, I always say that. I told Dave I work with the black guys. Makes me look good.
All right.
I got 2 black guys coming to the USA, so.
Every time I see a black dude at a show, like serious, like hard as shit, like just destroying white dudes, I go, I guarantee you he's natural too. And it's just, I guarantee you he's natural. I saw this guy at the Connecticut show, just like hamstring bellies, like it's not super hard and grainy, but I'm like, I guarantee that dude's natural because their genetics are just retarded. I mean, they could just look at dumbbells and grow.
Hashtag RX debate. Again, if you want to get your question or comment on it, we do have one question which we'll ask after the final word. So, Dave, you get the final word on this subject. Again, it is a serious one. I know we kind of had some fun with it with Anthony Pasquale dropping out last year before the USA Championships. Many thought he could win, and under a lot of mysterious circumstances, withdrew from the competition. Rumor has it that he is going to enter this year, but given the rumors and given the innuendo that's out there, do you think this is a growing problem, the stress that some of these competitors are under, and perhaps the role of what they're taking?
I think there's stress in anything that we do, but I think bodybuilders in particular, and I know because I was one for many years, like Chris said, we put a lot of stress on ourselves, and and I see this happen a lot. I see bodybuilders quitting their jobs. I see bodybuilders giving up everything in their life for the one contest because that's the most important thing. It's a very self-centered, egotistical, but that's what it takes to win. So when you do and you give up everything, I remember Kai Green telling me, after the New York Pro one year that he took 12th. I think he won Best Poser. This is right before he went on a tear of winning shows. He hadn't paid his cell phone bill. He hadn't paid anything. He had like outstanding debt everywhere, and he didn't even have money for another food meal the next day. That's how low he went. So when you put that kind of pressure on yourself and you don't come through, it's traumatizing. And a lot of guys would rather sometimes back out than have to see themselves fail. Now I was never that type of person. I'm sure Chris and I don't think Boston is. We all like to. We're gambles. We lay it on the line. If I'm going to put this much effort in something, you're damn right I'm going to go through with it and see how it pans out. Because I believe that there is no wrong solution or there's no bad outcome. It's just how you perceive the outcome to be. So having said that, I think that there's different personalities. Some people are very confident and sure of themselves. Some people are very unconfident. And there's a lot of non-confident. There's a lot of bodybuilders out there that are unsure of themselves, even though they're these big bulking guys. They put on that bulk because that's like a protective suit of armor for them. So I probably, and I've said this before, probably most top level bodybuilders need a real sports psychologist to deal with the mental issues they have, because I think that's why Kai Green has never won the Olympia. I think he mentally is defeated before he gets there, and guys like Jay Cutler, guys like Phil Heath, they know how to win, and they have that mindset that there's nothing going to turn them away, and they believe they're the champions. Yeah,
that's well.
So, guys, again, before we go to our FaceTime segment, we did open up the Twitter hashtag RxDebate. We do have a question. Dave, I'm going to direct this question to you. It is from Robert Salazar, Robert Salazar 3, and he asks, will Zach King Khan ever make it to an Olympia stage? Hashtag I hope so.
Well, I saw Zach with him when I was in, I believe it was Brazil, and Zach had torn his quads, both quadricep muscles, a number of years back, and he had not only did he tear them and have them repaired, but he had to have them redone. I thought I had it bad. He had 2 of them redone, and I saw his legs, and he flexed them for me at this Brazilian Arnold Classic Expo, and I was actually really surprised how good they looked. And I believe that Zach could get himself into good shape. I think he might have the potential to win a pro show. At this point in time, I think he's making more money by not competing. He walks around like a freak. He's huge in Europe. He works for Nutrex. He sells a lot of product for them. He probably makes a very nice salary for himself. And maybe the people at Nutrex are telling him, you know what? You don't need to compete. Be a big freak. Sell product for us, and we're happy. It might be the best thing he does. If he gets on the stage and he doesn't do well, what happens? His stock may go down.
He's a freak in the gym and just falls apart on stage.
Chris,
we've never really seen him on the stage at 100% either. So,
Chris, you want to chime in real quick?
No, I think he. I'm shocked the way his legs have come back, and I I think that he did compete last year, and he was very, very competitive. I think he made top 10 at a very deep, maybe it was a year and a half ago, one of the Europa shows. But that's when his legs have improved since then. So I think he can. I'm not sure if he can win a pro show, but he can be like in a Europa for sure, top 3. He just needs to continue to bring the legs up, and they have improved. And I agree with you. Again, I saw them also, and they've come a long way.
Again, the hashtag to participate in our conversations for future shows, hashtag RxDebate. We thank all that tweeted at us tonight. Well, that brings us now to our FaceTime segment of the show. Each of our participants have prepared a minute, a little bit longer rant, something that they're passionate about, something that they have a pet peeve, something that they just wanted to get off their chest. So, first-time participant, Bostin Lloyd, we go to you first for the FaceTime.
All right, so I'm going to piss a lot of people off, as I usually do on Facebook with this, and people are going to probably be like, all these little freaking mad scientists that look like shit are going to start ranting. But so I'm going to talk about if it fits your macros, and a lot of this thing is scientific, science based. So basically, they're saying it's science, so it has to work. But it's funny because all these kids on my page that are like, it works, this and that. They look like skinny fat, like gardeners, like skinny fat, like Hispanics, like just like that whole look. It's just not a good look. Like it's like, okay, let's have 2 to 3 portions a day and fit all our macros. And instead of having our carbs from oatmeal, we're gonna fit it in with grape juice, or we're going to fit it in with whatever the hell we want. But a carb is a carb, a protein is protein, and a fat is a fat. So they're getting their fats from Pop-Tarts. They're getting their carbs from Pop-Tarts. And they're just fitting it in, and they all look like shit. Then you got to wonder, is science So do you really look at yourself in the mirror and be like, yeah, science is working? I don't know. I honestly don't know what these guys go through their head. But they all look like shit. So shout out to all the shitty looking picture macros. And that's my little rant.
Bostin Lloyd, appreciate you bringing it tonight, especially at the 11th hour. Chris Aceto, we go back over to you now for FaceTime.
Partial reps, dude. I cannot believe that people claim that partial reps are reps at all. Partial reps is when you can't do the real reps, meaning you've done the whole thing, and now to try to tax the muscle a little bit above and beyond where you normally could, you do halves. But I see well-known bodybuilders, amateur and professional too, on the damn hammer chest press machine and shoulder press machine doing half of half reps. And some of the guys are winning shows, some of the guys are placing higher shows, but it's a joke. If you, it's akin to some guy coming to work for me and working half a day. I said, you know what, you're not getting paid. Pay you to work the whole damn day to work, not fake work. So, I can't believe that people are. Well, I can, and we still do this. Where are the Wheelers? Where are the Leverons? Where are the Sonny Schmitts? Where are the Aaron Bakers? Where are the 90s guys? And the 90s guys didn't do partials. They did real reps, real weight, real barbells and dumbbells. And this is part of the not evolution, but the devolution, the regression of the physiques that it's a small piece. Besides overeating and taking a ton of stuff, people don't even know the basics in terms of how to train. They're doing partial stuff, which creates not even a partial physique.
So Chris Aceto pointing out the partial reps and giving a tip of the hat to the old school training techniques. Chris bringing it, as always, on this show. So for our final FaceTime, we go to the boss, Dave Palumbo.
Chris and I seem to be psychically synced, so I'm going to take off where he left off, because my pet peeve is the fact that no one does compound movements anymore. I was watching a video, Jay Cutler and Kai Green, and they were training together at Bev's gym, and they were talking about, how, what the best mass movements are for chest. And Jay is saying, without a doubt, bench pressing. Even though he doesn't do them anymore because he's got a well-developed chest and he uses the Smith machine, and meanwhile Kai's banging out reps on the hammer strength machine. And you just don't see guys bench pressing anymore. When I first started lifting, that was the movement we did: flat bench press, incline bench press. That's what built a big chest. And I don't see anyone doing that anymore. I see everyone on these machines, and like Chris said, they're not even doing full reps. I got to tell you, I saw a video the other day, and we talked about this on Muscle in the Morning. Akeem Williams was incline bench pressing 465 pounds for about 4 or 5 good, clean, all the way down, full repetitions. And I was so impressed that, thank God, someone's still lifting heavy basic movements. And you know what? His physique shows it, because the guy's been gaining 10, 15 pounds a year for the last 5 years, and he's looks like a freak. He reminds me of a Ronnie Coleman. Ronnie Coleman was doing heavy dumbbell presses, heavy incline presses right up to the end of his career, and it showed in his physique. And I wish more guys would go back to that. But I don't know if it's a laziness thing, or if people just, it's more glamorous to just go in the gym and wear cool-looking clothes and cool-looking sneakers, and maybe take more, supplements rather than actually trying to push yourself hard.
Take more supplements, taking more selfies at the gym. That seems to be the way that everything is progressing, or as Chris said, regressing. That is going to do it for another edition of Iron Debate. Reminder, big show tomorrow night, Heavy Muscle TV. It is going to be a celebrity edition of Heavy Muscle TV. We are going to be joined in studio by Rosario Dawson. You'll remember her from the Sin City movies, Clerks movies, He Got Game, Men in Black 2, and in addition to that, Chris Algieri, the light welterweight champion of the world. Just last night, it was announced he will be taking on Manny Pacquiao on November 22nd. He will be live in studio. You're not going to want to miss that. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on RxMuscle.com. Special thanks to Johnny Styles, our director and producer, doing the magic behind the scenes, making sure we get on air. I'm Sadiq Faruqi, wishing you good night. Make sure to keep it locked on our Facebook page and Twitter feed. Keep it locked to RxMuscle.com. Have a good night.